This story was submitted by someone we'll call Rachel, a 24-year-old nurse who frequently used Uber to get home from her late-night shifts at the hospital. Rachel had used the service hundreds of times without incident and considered herself a safety-conscious passenger who always checked license plates and driver photos. It was around 11 p.m. on a Tuesday when Rachel requested her usual ride home. The driver arrived promptly in the correct vehicle, a silver sedan matching the app description. The driver's photo matched the person behind the wheel, and his rating was 4.8 stars with over 2,000 rides completed. For the first 15 minutes, everything seemed normal. The driver was polite but quiet, following the GPS route displayed on Rachel's phone. Rachel was tired from her shift and dozed off in the back seat, something she'd done countless times before on familiar routes. When Rachel woke up, she immediately knew something was wrong. Instead of the suburban neighborhood where she lived, she found herself on a dark, rural road with no streetlights or houses visible. The driver had deviated completely from the planned route and was heading into increasingly isolated territory. Rachel asked the driver where they were going, and he claimed there was construction ahead that required a detour. But when Rachel checked her phone's GPS, it showed no construction alerts and indicated they were now over 30 miles from her destination in the opposite direction. Growing concerned, Rachel insisted the driver turn around and take her home immediately. That's when his demeanor changed completely. He calmly told her that they needed to make a quick stop first and that she shouldn't worry about it. His tone was reassuring, but the situation was anything but reassuring. Rachel realized her phone had no signal in this remote area, preventing her from contacting anyone or tracking their location through the app. The driver seemed to know the area well, taking turns without hesitation onto unmarked dirt roads that led deeper into what appeared to be state forest land. When Rachel demanded to be let out of the car, the driver locked the doors and told her to, "Just relax, and everything will be fine." Rachel began to panic, realizing she was being kidnapped by someone who had used the rideshare platform to identify and isolate a victim. Rachel managed to stay calm enough to formulate an escape plan. She told the driver she was feeling carsick and needed fresh air immediately, or she would vomit in his car. Concerned about his vehicle, the driver pulled over and unlocked the doors. The moment the locks disengaged, Rachel burst out of the car and ran into the woods. The driver called after her, initially trying to convince her to come back. But when Rachel kept running, she heard the car door slam and the engine start. Rachel spent 3 hours hiding in the forest before the driver finally left. She followed the dirt road back to a main highway, where she flagged down a passing motorist who called police. By the time authorities investigated, the fake Uber driver was long gone. The investigation revealed that the man had been using stolen driver credentials to operate under a legitimate account. He had specifically targeted lone female passengers during late-night shifts, using the app's detailed passenger information to plan abductions. Rachel learned that several other women had reported similar incidents, but the driver had successfully evaded capture by constantly changing vehicles and stolen identities. Rachel no longer uses rideshare services and has moved closer to her workplace to avoid depending on transportation apps. The experience taught her that driver ratings and verification systems can be easily circumvented by determined criminals. This account comes from someone we'll call Marcus, a 22-year-old college student who was leaving a late-night study session at the campus library. Marcus had called an Uber to take him back to his off-campus apartment, a trip he'd made dozens of times before. When Marcus received the notification that his driver had arrived, he went outside to find a black SUV waiting in the pickup area. The license plate matched what was shown in the app, and when Marcus approached, the driver confirmed his name and destination. Everything seemed legitimate. Marcus got into the vehicle and immediately noticed something felt off. The car's interior was different from what he'd expected. Older and more worn than typical Uber vehicles. When he mentioned this to the driver, the man claimed he was using a different car because his regular vehicle was being repaired. About 10 minutes into the ride, Marcus realized they weren't heading toward his apartment. When he questioned the route, the driver said he was avoiding traffic and taking a shortcut. But Marcus knew the area well, and they were definitely going in the wrong direction. Marcus checked his phone and discovered something alarming. According to the Uber app, his ride was still waiting for pickup at the library. The trip had never officially started, which meant the car he was currently in wasn't his actual Uber ride. Panicking, Marcus demanded to be let out immediately. The fake driver refused, claiming they were almost to the destination. When Marcus threatened to call the police, The driver became aggressive, telling him to shut up and sit back, while accelerating and locking the doors. Marcus realized he was in serious danger. The man driving had somehow intercepted his ride request and was now taking him to an unknown location for unknown purposes. Marcus began texting his location to friends and family while trying to stay calm. The fake driver seemed to notice Marcus using his phone and demanded he hand it over. When Marcus refused, the driver pulled over aggressively and turned around to grab the phone. In that moment, Marcus saw an opportunity. As the driver reached for his phone, Marcus opened the car door and bolted. The driver shouted after him, but Marcus kept running until he reached a well-lit gas station where he called the police and his real Uber driver, who was still waiting at the library pickup location. Police investigation revealed that the fake driver had been monitoring rideshare pickup locations around the campus, specifically targeting young male students. He would position himself near popular pickup spots and approach passengers before their real drivers arrived, using basic information from overheard phone conversations to impersonate legitimate drivers. The man was eventually arrested after attempting the same scam with another student who managed to record his license plate. Authorities discovered he had been operating this scheme for months, and several students had fallen victim to various levels of assault and robbery. Marcus learned that criminals were exploiting the trust passengers place in rideshare systems. The fake driver had studied common pickup patterns and used social engineering to appear legitimate until passengers were isolated and vulnerable. Marcus now always verifies his driver's identity by asking them to confirm his name first, rather than providing his own name for confirmation. He also waits inside buildings until he can visually confirm his actual driver has arrived. The third story comes from someone we'll call Sarah, a 26-year-old marketing professional who used Uber daily to commute to work in downtown Chicago. Sarah had been using the same rideshare routes for over a year and had built a routine around the service. One particular driver, whom we'll call Tom, began appearing frequently as Sarah's assigned driver. This wasn't unusual. The app's algorithm often matched passengers with drivers who operated in the same areas during similar hours. Tom seemed professional and friendly, and his ratings were excellent. Over the course of several weeks, Tom began making increasingly personal comments during rides. He would ask about Sarah's work schedule, her weekend plans, and her living situation. Initially, Sarah thought he was just being friendly and making conversation to pass time during traffic. Tom began offering unsolicited advice about Sarah's life based on things he'd overheard during her phone calls in the car. He would comment on her relationships, suggest restaurants near her apartment, and even mention things about her routine that she hadn't directly told him. Sarah started feeling uncomfortable but wasn't sure how to address the situation without seeming rude. Tom's behavior wasn't overtly threatening, just increasingly invasive and personal. Sarah began requesting different drivers, but Tom continued to appear as her assigned driver more often than seemed statistically likely. One evening, Sarah discovered the disturbing truth behind Tom's behavior. She was at a restaurant near her apartment when she spotted Tom sitting alone at a corner table, watching her through the window. When their eyes met, he smiled and waved as if their encounter was completely normal. Sarah immediately left the restaurant and called the police. When officers arrived, Tom was gone, but restaurant staff confirmed he had been there for over an hour, specifically positioned to observe Sarah's table. This wasn't a coincidence. Tom had been stalking her outside of their rideshare interactions. The investigation revealed that Tom had been using information gathered during Uber rides to track Sarah's personal life. He had noted her work schedule, her favorite restaurants, her gym, and other locations mentioned during phone calls or conversations. He had been systematically building a profile of her routine and following her during his off hours. Most disturbingly, Tom had been taking photos of Sarah during rides and had created social media accounts to monitor her online activity. He had been studying her life in detail, using his position as her regular driver to gather information that would be impossible for a normal stalker to obtain. Sarah learned that Tom had done this to multiple female passengers. He specifically targeted women who used rideshare services regularly and predictably, allowing him to insert himself into their daily routines while gathering personal information for stalking purposes. When confronted by police, Tom claimed he was just being friendly and that any encounters outside of rides were purely coincidental. However, evidence on his phone revealed extensive surveillance activities and detailed notes about multiple passengers' personal lives. Tom was arrested and charged with stalking and harassment, Sarah discovered that several other women had reported similar experiences with the same driver, but the rideshare company had failed to identify the pattern until police compiled multiple complaints. Sarah no longer uses her real name on rideshare apps and varies her pickup and drop-off locations to prevent drivers from learning her exact routine. She also reports any driver who asks personal questions or makes her feel uncomfortable, regardless of how minor the behavior might seem. The final story comes from someone we'll call Lisa, a 19-year-old college student who was returning to her dorm after a late-night campus event. It was around 2 a.m., and Lisa had called an Uber because the campus shuttle had stopped running for the night. The driver who picked Lisa up seemed normal at first, an older man driving a clean sedan with good ratings on the app. Lisa got into the front passenger seat, which was her usual preference for short campus rides. The driver confirmed her destination and began driving toward her dorm. About halfway through the ride, the driver began asking Lisa personal questions about her living situation. He wanted to know if she lived alone, whether she had a boyfriend, and what her class schedule was like. Lisa answered politely but briefly, not wanting to be rude to someone providing her a service. The driver then began making inappropriate comments about Lisa's appearance and asking if she was interested in making extra money by spending time with lonely older men. Lisa immediately felt uncomfortable and asked to be dropped off at the nearest well-lit location rather than her dorm. Instead of complying, the driver continued toward the original destination while escalating his inappropriate behavior. He reached over and touched Lisa's leg, claiming he was just being friendly. When Lisa moved away and told him to stop, he laughed and said she was too uptight. Lisa realized she was in serious danger when the driver drove past her dorm without stopping. When she demanded to know where he was taking her, he said they were going to have some fun, and that she should just relax and go with it. The driver had locked the doors and was now heading toward a poorly lit area of campus, where construction had left several buildings empty. Lisa understood that if the car stopped in an isolated location, her situation would become much worse. Lisa managed to unlock her door while the car was slowing for a turn. She jumped out while the vehicle was still moving, sustaining injuries to her knees and hands, but escaping before the driver could stop her. She ran to the nearest emergency call box and contacted campus security. Campus police responded immediately and managed to locate the driver, who was still in the area apparently searching for Lisa. When arrested, he claimed the incident was a misunderstanding and that Lisa had led him on during their conversation. The investigation revealed that the driver had a history of inappropriate behavior with female passengers, particularly young college students using late-night rides. Multiple women had reported similar incidents, but many had been too embarrassed or traumatized to file formal complaints. The driver had specifically targeted female students during vulnerable hours, late nights when they were alone, tired, or possibly intoxicated. He used his position as a driver to isolate victims and test boundaries before escalating to assault. Lisa learned that predators often use rideshare platforms to access potential victims because the apps provide detailed information about passengers' locations, destinations, and travel patterns. The rating system doesn't account for subtle predatory behavior that falls short of causing passengers to report incidents. Lisa now only uses rideshare services with friends and never rides alone late at night. She sits in the back seat with doors unlocked until she's confident in the driver's behavior, and she shares her ride details with multiple friends before getting into any vehicle.